Okay, so good day everyone. I am Reina Liana de la Rosa, together with my group mates Angelica Estabaya, Nimrod Flores, and Maria Belen Geolege. We are the group 3 from CED-02-301A, and we are tasked to report today about the topic of young adult literature. So before we begin, we will have a short exercise or icebreaker to all of you, and this can also help you to further understand or to have an idea what our report is all about. So to introduce the icebreaker, I would like to give the floor to Miss Belen Gayoleke.
So, thank you for that. Before we start the presentation, let's first have some warm up activities. The title of our activity will be called Guess the Book Title by the Emoji. So we've converted a bunch of books title from words to emojis. You need to decipher which famous book is represented by the emoticons. Behind each set of emojis is a hidden meaning that will reveal the answer. In some cases, the emojis and word revealed in relation to the others will be a guiding factor in allowing you to reach the correct answer. So use the clues to guess the book titles. For the instruction, access or join the link of quizzes that will be sent in chat box. Enter your name for your identification because your score or points will be recorded and you have 20 seconds to guess each book title from the emojis. And lastly, try your best and have fun. You may start now. So time's over. Congratulations to our first place Miss De La Rosa, second place Avril, and so, congratulations to everyone and thank you for participating. As you have guessed, those books are examples of young adult literature, and I know you are all familiar with those. Maybe you've heard of or read the book, while you have watched the movie as an adaptation from the book. So, to end this activity and start our presentation, I want to read this quote. Dumbledore once said, "Words are, in my not so humble opinion, our most inaccessible source of magic, capable of both inflicting injury and remedying it." And I believe that's how powerful literature is. It opens us up to a wider range of emotion. So that's all, and thank you. So I pass the floor to Ms. De Rosa once again to start our presentation.
Okay, thank you for that, Miss Kiolege. So for the start of our report, so let us first define what is young adult literature. So next slide, please. Okay, so due to its proximity to both children and adult literature, the wide range of topics it can cover, young adult literature is difficult to categorize. So I've seen different sources that said young adult literature does not have a consistent or proper definition because it changed from time to time. So abuse, Death, war, suicide, and other similar topics abound, from the simplest to the most difficult. Even though some of these subjects seem more appropriate for adults, there are few things that distinguish books for young adults from those for adults only. So, works of literature aimed at teens are referred to as young adult literature. These books typically feature a young protagonist who is dealing with issues that all young people face, for example, belonging, falling in love, or deciding what to do in the future, or other issues that young people are afraid that they may have faced, for example, violence, drug dependency, alcoholism, being alone, the death of a loved one, pregnancy, or parental divorce. So anything that young adults choose to read on their own is considered as young adult literature, and there is a wide range of interest in reading among teenagers. So, young adult literature is a little tricky because there are some heavy genres to consider in young adult literature. So I also read the source that says that there is an ongoing kind of debate because how can young adult literature be like that? That the target audience are like young people, but the genre it has is quite complicated. It has a quite complicated genre. But young adult literature, as they said, is at one type that young adults need to be more prepared in the future. So that is the like a preparation for them. So another thing is most of the stories we read since we are young is considered already as young adult literature as we go further to the examples. And I'm sure you'll be very familiar with some of it. And next slide, please. Okay, so for the background of the young adult literature, so the term young adult literature is dynamic terms that change as culture and society, which provide their context change. As a result, the term young adult literature is inherently ambiguous. So when we say ambiguous, it means that it is unclear or inexact. And just like what I said before, that the definition of young adult literature changes over time, and its other definition was created by various scholars based on their perspectives. So when the term first became popular in the late 1960s, it was used to refer contemporary realistic fiction that was set in the real world rather than an imagined one in addressed issues, problems, and life circumstances that would be of interest to young readers between the ages of 12 and 18 years old. So these books were distributed by American Publishers Children's Book Division and sold to libraries and schools that serve such populations. So the majority of young adult literature is thought to be written for readers between ages and 12 years old. 12 and 18 years old rather. So it is intended to ease the transition from middle grade to adult fiction and serves as the next level of reading material. So it also provides stories that are generally emotionally and thematically more advanced for readers. And young adult is category of fiction based on readers' ages rather than a genre. And it exists in a variety of genres including fantasy, mystery, and science fiction, and represents a particular demographics level of reading, worldview, and maturity. And the majority of young adult novels focus on adolescents at the beginning of their adulthood. They work through their personal issues, discover hidden aspects of themselves, and learn to take responsibility for their actions. So as a result, young adult fiction or young adult literature is also known as a coming age of fiction. So next slide, please. So there's an ongoing issue or debate about the difference between young adult literature versus the adult literature. So there are three examples on how they differ. So first is the age of protagonist. So in the side of young adult literature, it must have a single protagonist only. So it usually appear in upper teen ages between 15 to 19 years old, while on the other hand, the adult fiction or the adult literature can have a main character at any age, but generally favors 20 years old and above. So next is the voice and style. So for instance, young adult fiction or young adult literature favors a sense of immediacy and in the moment storytelling, often told in close third person or first person and or present tense. While the majority of adult fiction is told in the third person, and sometimes from an omniscient point of view, and it tends to be written in the style of retrospective on the past. Prose that is more reflective and lyrical is often preferred to the action and plot focused style of many young adult books. So the third and last one is the themes. So this part is a little tricky and confusing because many people have erroneously believed that young adult literature's themes are less important than those in adult literature, or that themes in adult literature are not allowed in young adult. But this is simply not the case. So, coming of age in young adult literature, for instance, or existential reflections in adult literature, are topics that are unquestionably more exclusive to one genre over the other. However, is frequently overlap between the two categories in terms of themes. The distinction arises from how themes are investigated. So, an example of theme that can differentiate young adult from adult books is the theme of violence. So, for example, the theme is violence and the level of graphic detail used to portray it. Although young adult does not prohibit violence, it is safe to assume, or it is safe to say, that a book with extremely graphic violence is likely intended for adults rather than the children. So the themes of violence or graphic detail is much larger in adult books rather than young adult literature. So next slide, please. So here are some of the examples of young adult literature. So first is Marie Lou's Legend. Next is Little Women. Next slide, please. Okay, next is The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cineros, and To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I know some of you are familiar with that. Next slide, please. Swiftly Tilting Planet, and I know a lot of you are very familiar with it. This is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. And I know some of those books are quite familiar to all of you, as I said. And I know that there are still a lot or tons of various books that fall under young adult literature, and those examples are quite a lot. Okay, so for the next report, I would like to give the floor to Miss Angelica Estabaya. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction and, of course, discussion of the background of young adult literature. Now, let us move on to the qualities of young adult literature. So, as Rain may have said earlier, it is hard to distinguish what young adult literature is because, mainly because it is a transitional literature from children literature to adult literature. Pero we are going to find that distinction by scrutinizing these qualities of young adult literature. All right, so I have here criterias. So by criterias, if the book you are reading or the content you are consuming has these criterias, it probably is a part of young adult literature. So first, it must reflect young adults' age and development. So mainly adolescents, ages 12 to 20, they are the ones who are consuming young adults literature. So you might question, are these uh, is YAL the books that is written specifically for adolescents, or is it the book, or are these the books that are mainly read by adolescents? So uh, to answer that, the book has to be age appropriate because, firstly, if it's too easy, there is no challenge. If there is no challenge, there would be no room for new knowledge. There would be no progression. And second, if the themes are too much to handle by that certain age range, as Ring said, rape, mutilation, suicide, murder, then it's not for that certain age range. And then third, uh, you have to consider the literacy quality or the literary quality. Does it offer development? Does it address the reading abilities of the readers? Does it uh, does it correlate with the thinking levels and the interest levels? Because if the book does not interest the reader at all, imbes na ma-encourage siya, she will be discouraged. I have an example actually. So, if you know Jane Austen, she is a renowned writer of classics. Siyempre, if it's classics, it's hard to consume it, lalo na if you are on the age 12 to 16. So, I forced myself to read a classic and learn nothing from it. Literally, I learned nothing from it. And so, I went to expressions. This is in Shomol or Starmol, I forgot. But I found there versions of the books, the classics, that is under young adult literature na, and it is simplified. So I bought that one, the Pride and Prejudice book by Jane Austen, and I proceeded to read it, and I consumed it, and I literally enjoyed it. Unlike the version that I found on the internet, kasi it's very hard to consume. Kasi it's not for my age, it's not for my reading level, and it also does not give me the enjoyment that I am looking for. Next is it has to deal with contemporary issues, problems, and experiences. By experiences, I mean the characters of the literature that you are reading. It has the adolescents has to relate to them, those characters, because that what inflicts engagement. Eh. If you can notice, your junior high school years, it revolves around young adult literature, right? And your teacher would ask you, can you relate? Can you see yourself as one of the characters? And then the students would raise their hand, saying their opinion. They're very engaged. They're very promoted in the discussion. That's because uh, they can see themselves on the characters or the course of action that the characters do. And these contemporary issues that is being addressed, like a part of problem novel, these are the issues that we face every day. This could be the problems that we are going to face, such as pregnancy, eating disorders, sexual exploitation, alcohol, drugs, whatever. Peer pressure, yan, sa atin. Lagi yan, peer pressure. And I'll give an example, yung very pumatok, very mainstream. It received so much love. Do you know the book Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda? If you know, chat na lang kayo sa chat box. Actually, that book received a lot of backlash. However, it received so much support that it has, it already has a movie adaptation. Bakit? Because first, a lot of contemporary issues are presented there. Second, it's a queer novel. It's queer representation. It's homosexual representation. Third, merong bullying. Merong depictions of how you face bullying. How do you face being blackmailed? How do you face your parents and classmates and colleagues, acquaintances once you come out of the closet? Diba? That's why this book became mainstream. And of course, its second part also became mainstream because it's about other sexuality, and it discusses about sexual exploration, which in our age is very significant or relevant. Lastly, it should consider contemporary world perspectives. I believe that every reader should not be confined in their surroundings alone. If you are a reader, you would have to experience or at least know different things kahit surface level lang. So you would have to see other world perspectives, may it be cultural, social, may it be gender diversity, environmental issues, may it be about politics or international dependence, alliance, whatever. You can find all of that in young adult literature. If you want to learn that in a book rather than in school, that's okay. That's okay because young adult literature, one of its criteria is to present you that, the contemporary world perspectives. And of course, a book, it has to be your window to the world. It has to be the one presenting you the world, opening your eyes, opening your perspectives, so that you can answer your questions so that can feed your curiosity. Kasi in this adolescent stage, you have many questions. Your role in society, the importance of relationships, what is your role in the world, sort sort of questions like that. And of course, we also have purpose. So young adult literature serves many purposes. One of this is teaching diversity. As I've mentioned nga, YAL or young adult literature teaches about diverse peoples and the world beyond them, beyond what you see. And of course, it provides pleasure. Pleasure in terms of reading. And then third, what's this? Demonstration of the range of human emotions. Kasi nga, as I've mentioned, YAL is your transitional literature from children to adult. Now, there is a big gap. There's a big discrepancy. To fill that discrepancy, your bridge is this one, the young adult literature. It allows adolescents to experience them as result of their uh, reading good books. Itataas mo na kamay? I'll get back to you later. Next, providing revelation of realities of life. Because in YAL, as mentioned by Rain, yun nga, contemporary issues, problems that you have to solve, and the protagonist sometimes or most often you can see yourself in the protagonist solving that problem because it's coming of age most often. And then providing vicarious experiences. Oh, imagine just by reading YA alone, you get to be a hero, you get to be a doctor, you get to be a journalist, you get to be a warrior, you get to live 1,000 lives because you live different shoes when you're reading. That's what we call vicarious experiences. And it make order it makes order out of chaos because YAL also serves to present you solutions on the problems that you might face. And then depicting functions of institutions of society and then provide an escape because it allows readers to go from the stress of life to the realms of fantasy. So I've read some of your comments on the Google Classroom. You're saying that literature became your comfort, your escape, yeah, your haven. And I also agree with that. Next, it introduces writings and writers, and not just only mere writings and writers. What I mean about that is that excellent writings and writers. From along the way you're reading YAL, you have your own set of favorites, favorite poems, favorite proses, ba? And then literacy and analyzation of literature. Kasi in YAL, in reading YAL, you don't get to experience pleasure alone, enjoyment. You are improving. You are moving through your stages of reading development. Kasi independent reading, it might have different intentions. You might be building your fluency. You might be reading for pleasure. You might be reading to learn. And of course, as your age progresses, you might also be reading to progress to mature reading, which require critical reading and analysis, and that requires a higher level of literacy and your ability to analyze a piece of literature. Okay, so I have here, ayan, kasi to uh, it's hard to compartmentalize young adult literature. So we have here genres, categories, and subcategories. Yan. Ito yung present ni Ring, contemporary realistic fiction or problem novel. That's mainly the protagonist solving the contemporary issues as we see today. What are the issues you are facing right now? Basically, or technically, those are the same set of problems that a problem novel has. And then we have adventure, mystery, and humor, science fiction, fantasy, horror, historical fiction, biography, non-fiction, information, poetry, dramas, short stories, and mga poetry, comic books, graphic novels, picture books, and magazines. I would also like to include visual novels. If you are aware of visual novels, yun yung may mga plotline, with the accompaniment of like uh, a character of your own, like an RPG game. So mostly makikita nyo yun sa video games. If you are bored of just mainly reading and you want a breath of fresh air, you can try visual novels. There are a lot of free oh, there are a lot of free visual novels out there like Doki Doki Literature Club and whatsoever. And that would be all from my discussion. Pero may ano muna ako, book recommendation. This is North of Happy by Adi Al-Said. Kasi alam ko, some of you are in great pressure right now and I want to say the same. So this is a short read. Kung interested kayo, I can give you a copy as well. And it's about overcoming your challenges and pursuing your career. So next, I would like to call Mr. Nimrod to discuss the history of young adult literature. Mr. Nimrod,
So, am I audible?
yes.
Right. Thank you for that, Mrs. Tabaya. Now let's proceed to the history of young adult literature. Literature. Next, please. So, the history of children's books, according to scholars or um, experts, began in the early 1600s. However, the history of books designed specifically for adolescents. So this is much shorter, and this could be a result of the fact of the adolescence years were not considered a distinct ones of lifespan until 1904, and when G. Stanley Hall published his work Adolescence. And even with this recognition, it was not until well into to the 1940s that the world's economic and social conditions significantly changed to make it fully possible to have a period past childhood. So once the first group of post-war babies had reached their teenage years in the 1960s, society not only accepted the idea of adolescence but began to see the age group as one with distinct characteristics and needs. So it was then in the 1960s and 70s when new ideas about personal conduct and societal rules for teens became a paramount, that we see emergence of young adult literature as a separate genre. And so next slide, please. So most critics agree that it was in 1967 with publication of S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders, and in 1968 with Paul Zindel's The Pigman that young adult literature was born. And the groundbreaking works by Hinton's and Zindel's were the first to portray that the world from the perspective of a teenager. And following in their footsteps were Robert Lipsyte, M. Eaker, Robert Newton Peck, and perhaps the most famously Robert Cormier's The Chocolate War, 1974, and Judy Blume's um, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, 1970. Um, so these early works were frequently works of a pretty realism that deal with difficulties and issues and complex characters in a way that appealed to teenagers like us. So, dealing with harsh realities of a period that was characterized by rock and roll, war, and riots. So, next slide, please. So as the 70s came to a close, we saw changes in our young adult literature. Um, this time it began to change na the perspective of people to young adult literature, with media playing a much stronger role in the lives of teens, and also the reading habits also changed. So the Babysitter Club, Sweet Valley High, and Fear Street were favorites of many teens in this era. So the groundbreaking books such as Cynthia Voigt's Dicey Songs and during 1983, Walter Dean Myers' Fallen Angels 1989, and Francesca Lia Bloch's Witsy Bat 1989 also came on the scene during this period. Next, excuse. So in 1990s, they saw another significant shift in history of young adult literature. In search that during this time that many critics attribute to the Harry Potter phenomena, as you all know, the famous book. So this is first published in the United States during 1989. So during this time, reading became cool again. So additionally, publishers started to notice a sizable market among teenagers. So with a lot of extra money, so they started to produce more books for this group of audience or for this group of readers. And by the turn of century, young adult literature had become the fastest growing market in the industry. And also according to market intelligence companies like Simba, there are about 2,000 new books published each year. So, ganito ka, this is how the market of young adult literature so big and impressive. So, this impressive growth spans the gamut from realism to fantasy and is constantly embracing new formats from graphic novels to short stories and like and with the establishment of different awards on young adult literature, are Wadham and J. Sino ba yun? Austenson claims that over the past century, young adult literature during this time has finally found a firm foundation or stronghold. So and has undergone a dynamic version and evolution as well. So that's all for the brief history of young adult literature. And so this is our references. So if you have questions or any clarifications, you may now ask them. So, meron po ba? So, wala naman. So, guys, thank you for your participation and thank you for your time. And that's all for our presentation. So, thank you guys very much. Yan, thank you po.